Look, I need to get this out because what happened 3 months ago is still eating at me, and honestly, the aftermath has been wild. My 10-year wedding anniversary dinner turned into the most humiliating night of my life, courtesy of my own family. Some background. I'm James, 32, married to Vicky for 10 years now. We've been together since college, and yeah, we've had our struggles. I work in IT support, not exactly rolling in money, but we make it work. Vicky teaches elementary school. We're not wealthy, but we're stable and happy, or so I thought. Here's the thing about my family that I should have mentioned earlier. I've always been the disappointment. While my brother Cody got his engineering degree and landed a job at a tech startup, I struggled through community college and worked my way up from basic help desk support. My sister Remy married her high school boyfriend, who owns a successful contracting business, and she never lets anyone forget it. My parents always made these subtle comments about how I was taking the longer path to success, how I should have applied myself more like my siblings. Vicky used to defend me in the early years of our marriage. She'd shut down the comments and change the subject when family gatherings got uncomfortable. But somewhere along the line, that stopped. She started laughing along with their jokes or staying quiet when they'd make their little digs about my career or our modest lifestyle. I told myself she was just trying to keep the peace, but looking back now, I think she started agreeing with them. The dinner was at this nice Italian place downtown. Nothing too fancy, but nicer than our usual spots. My parents, Melvin and Lucy, drove down. My brother Cody came with his girlfriend Sydney. My sister Remy showed up, and my uncle Kyler made the trip too. Basically, the whole family gathered to celebrate our milestone. Everything seemed normal at first. We ordered drinks, caught up on family stuff, the usual. Vicky seemed a little quiet, but I figured she was just tired from work. Then my mom stood up with her wine glass, and I thought she was going to make a sweet toast about marriage and commitment. Instead, she raised that glass and announced to the entire restaurant that 10 years was apparently how long this poor woman had wasted on our family's biggest disappointment, and that Vicky deserved a medal for charity work. The table went silent for exactly 2 seconds before my dad started laughing and said they were actually taking bets on whether she'd file for divorce by Christmas because a smart woman like her wouldn't tolerate dead weight forever. I sat there trying to process what I was hearing when my brother decided to pile on. He brought up my proposal, calling it pathetic and saying everyone knew she only said yes out of pity. The ring comment hit hard because, yeah, I couldn't afford much back then and had saved for months for that little diamond. I remember working overtime shifts for 3 months straight to afford that ring, skipping lunches and walking to work to save every penny. Then Remy, my own sister, casually mentioned that Vicky had supposedly told her she was already seeing someone successful and couldn't blame her for it. My uncle Kyler thought this was hilarious and joked that at least she'd get half of nothing in the divorce. The entire table erupted in laughter while I sat there like an idiot, watching my family tear me apart on what should have been a celebration. Other diners were starting to stare at our table because they were being so loud about it. But here's the part that really broke me. Vicky giggled. My wife of 10 years, the woman I thought had my back through everything, actually found this funny. She didn't defend me, didn't tell them to stop, just sat there smiling like she was in on some joke I didn't understand. I lifted my wine glass, took a slow sip, and smiled back at all of them. I didn't yell or make a scene. I just smiled and said the food was getting cold and maybe we should eat. The conversation moved on like nothing happened, but something fundamental shifted in me that night. After dinner, I drove home in complete silence while Vicky tried to make small talk about how nice it was to see everyone. She acted like the whole thing was just family teasing and that I was being too sensitive. When we got home, I told her I needed some air and went for a walk that lasted about 3 hours. Those 3 hours walking around our neighborhood gave me clarity I hadn't had in years. I realized that this wasn't the first time my family had treated me like the family screw-up. And it definitely wasn't the first time Vicky had failed to have my back when it mattered. All those little comments over the years. All those times they'd made jokes at my expense while she stayed quiet or even laughed along. The next morning, Vicky tried to bring it up over coffee, saying the family was just joking around and that I needed to learn to take a joke. She said my mom called her after dinner, and they had a nice chat about how sensitive I'd become lately. That's when I knew she really didn't get it. I started making changes immediately. Not dramatic ones, just practical decisions about my life and who deserved access to it. I stopped responding to the family group chat. When my mom called to complain about me being distant, I kept the conversation short and factual. When Vicky asked why I was being weird with everyone, I told her I was just busy with work stuff. The thing is, once I stopped trying so hard to please everyone and started focusing on what I actually wanted, things got better fast. I applied for a senior position at a different company and got it with a significant raise. The new job was at a growing software company that actually valued my experience and problem-solving skills. My new colleagues treated me like a professional, not like someone who needed to prove themselves constantly. I started going to the gym regularly. Not for them, but because I wanted to feel stronger physically and mentally. I joined a hiking group through a local outdoor club and made friends who actually respected me and were interested in my thoughts and opinions. For the first time in years, I was spending time with people who didn't see me as a punching bag or a source of entertainment. The changes were affecting every aspect of my life. I was sleeping better, feeling more confident at work, and actually enjoying my free time instead of dreading the next family obligation. I started buying clothes that I liked instead of whatever was cheapest. I upgraded my old beaten-up Honda Civic to a reliable used Toyota Camry. Nothing extravagant, but these were decisions I was making for myself without asking anyone's opinion or worrying about their judgment. Vicky noticed the changes but seemed to think it was just a phase. She kept trying to plan family gatherings and get-togethers, always acting confused when I'd decline or find other plans. My family started asking her why I was being so antisocial lately, like they genuinely couldn't connect their behavior to my distance. About 6 weeks after the anniversary dinner, things escalated. My brother called me directly, not to apologize, but to complain that I was making family events awkward by not showing up. He said Mom was hurt by my attitude and that I needed to get over whatever was bothering me. When I asked him if he remembered what happened at dinner, he brushed it off as just joking around and said, I used to have a better sense of humor. That conversation made me realize they truly didn't understand what they'd done. In their minds, they'd just been having fun at my expense like always. And my reaction was the problem. They expected me to go back to being the punching bag who smiled and took it, because that's what kept the family dynamic comfortable for them. My mom called Vicky to complain about me being difficult, and apparently they had long conversations about how I was going through some kind of phase. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't going through a phase. I was finally becoming the person I should have been all along. At my new job, my supervisor actually complimented my problem-solving approach and mentioned that I might be ready for a team lead position within the year. My hiking group invited me to join them on a weekend camping trip to the mountains. These people saw value in me that my own family had never acknowledged, but I wasn't that person anymore. I'd tasted what it felt like to have boundaries and self-respect, and there was no going back. I started being more direct about declining invitations and stopped making excuses for my absence. When Vicky pressured me to attend her birthday party that my family would be at, I told her clearly that I wouldn't be going anywhere that included people who disrespected me without consequence. She didn't understand why I was holding on to hurt feelings instead of just moving past it like I always had before. The breaking point came when my sister Remy called to invite us to her anniversary party. She actually had the nerve to say that my absence from family events was becoming embarrassing, and that people were starting to ask questions about what was wrong with me. When I told her exactly what was wrong, that our entire family had publicly humiliated me at my own anniversary dinner, she got defensive and said I was being oversensitive and that everyone was just trying to have fun. That's when I realized something important. They weren't sorry about what they'd done. They were only upset about the consequences they were experiencing from my changed behavior. None of them had apologized or even acknowledged that the dinner had been inappropriate. They just wanted me to go back to being the family doormat so they could continue their comfortable dynamic. This is where it gets interesting, and why I'm posting this now. 3 months after that anniversary dinner, my phone started blowing up. 53 missed calls in one morning, all from different family members. The voicemails were frantic, desperate, some of them actually sobbing. Update 1. The response to my first post was incredible, and yeah, a lot of you saw this coming from a mile away. Shout out to the commenter who said my family would eventually panic when they realized their punching bag was gone. You nailed it. So those 53 missed calls I mentioned, let me tell you what actually triggered that meltdown and how the conversations went when I finally decided to engage. Because trust me, it was even more revealing than I expected. First, let me back up and explain what my family had been dealing with for those 3 months while I was off living my best life. See, I wasn't just absent from their events. My absence was creating real problems for them that they hadn't anticipated. My mom had been planning my dad's retirement party for months, expecting me to help coordinate everything like I always did. I'm the one who usually handles the tech stuff, creates the photo slideshow, manages the guest list spreadsheet, and basically does all the organizational work while everyone else just shows up. When she realized I wasn't responding to any planning messages, she had to figure out how to do everything herself. Turns out organizing a party for 60 people is actually hard work when you can't delegate it to your convenient family scapegoat. My brother Cody had been counting on me to help him move into his new apartment. For years, I'd been the reliable one who showed up with my truck whenever anyone needed something moved, fixed, or handled. He'd already promised his girlfriend Sydney that we'd get everything moved in one weekend, and when I didn't respond to his messages asking about my availability, he had to hire actual movers. That cost him $400 he wasn't planning to spend. But the real catalyst was Thanksgiving. My mom had already told everyone in our extended family that we'd all be there like always. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The whole extended clan was expecting the usual family gathering. When it became clear I wasn't coming and wasn't going to help with any of the preparation, my mom had a complete meltdown. She called Vicky crying, asking what was wrong with me and why I was punishing the whole family. That's when Vicky finally told her the truth about how I'd been feeling since the anniversary dinner. But here's the thing, she didn't tell it accurately. According to my mom's version of the story, Vicky said I was upset about some jokes at dinner and was being dramatic about it. She made it sound like I was having some kind of emotional breakdown rather than making a rational decision to protect myself from toxic behavior. This is what led to the phone call avalanche. My mom convinced everyone that I was going through some kind of crisis and needed an intervention. They all got together and decided they needed to call me immediately to talk sense into me before I ruined Thanksgiving for everyone. When I finally listened to all the voicemails, the pattern was clear. Not one of them started with an apology or acknowledgement of what they'd done. Every single message was about how my behavior was affecting them and how I needed to get over whatever was bothering me for the sake of family harmony. I decided to call my mom back first. The conversation went exactly like you'd expect and exactly like I'd been preparing for. She immediately started crying and asking why I was doing this to the family. She said she didn't understand what she'd done wrong and that everyone was worried about me. So I told her exactly what she'd done wrong. I described that anniversary dinner in detail, her toast calling me the family's biggest disappointment, Dad's comments about betting on my divorce, Cody's cruel remarks about my proposal, Remy's claims about Vicky cheating, and the entire table laughing at my expense. I told her how humiliated I felt and how none of them had bothered to apologize or even acknowledge that it happened. Her response was infuriating but predictable. She said I was remembering it wrong, that everyone was just having fun and being playful. She claimed that I used to be able to take a joke and that I'd become too sensitive lately. She kept saying that families tease each other, and that's normal, and I was overreacting to typical family banter. I asked her if she thought it was normal family banter to publicly call your son a disappointment at his own anniversary dinner. She got defensive and said she was just trying to be funny and that everyone thought Vicky was great for putting up with me. When I pointed out that calling me dead weight who deserved to be divorced wasn't a compliment to Vicky, she said I was twisting her words and making everything sound worse than it was. The conversation lasted almost 2 hours because she kept trying different approaches to get me to back down. She tried guilt-tripping me about Dad's retirement party, saying I was ruining his special day. She tried bargaining, offering to talk to everyone about being more careful with their jokes. She tried manipulation, saying that Vicky was worried about our marriage and that my behavior was putting stress on everyone. But I held my ground. I told her that I wasn't interested in them being more careful with their jokes. I was interested in them treating me with basic respect. I explained that I'd built a good life for myself over the past few months and wasn't willing to go back to being the family punching bag just to make their gatherings more comfortable. That's when she got angry and showed her true colors. She said I was being selfish and dramatic, that I was tearing the family apart over nothing, and that I needed to grow up and stop holding grudges. She said that if I really loved my family, I'd stop punishing everyone for one stupid dinner and come to Thanksgiving like a mature adult. I told her I wasn't punishing anyone. I was simply choosing not to spend my time with people who treated me poorly. I said that if they wanted me at family gatherings, they needed to apologize for what they'd done and commit to treating me better going forward. Otherwise, I was perfectly happy spending my holidays with people who actually respected me. She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, my phone started ringing again. This time it was my dad, and he was furious. He said my mom was in tears and that I needed to stop being ridiculous and apologize to her for upsetting her. He said real men don't hold grudges over family jokes and that I was acting like a child. I asked him if he remembered making jokes about people betting on my divorce. He said it was just a funny comment and that I needed to lighten up. When I asked him how he'd feel if I made jokes about people betting on his and mom's divorce at their anniversary dinner, he said that was completely different because they had a strong marriage. The implication was clear. He thought it was acceptable to joke about my marriage failing because he genuinely believed it probably would. He wasn't sorry about the joke. He was sorry I was upset about hearing what they really thought of me. My brother called next, trying to play mediator. He said everyone was just stressed about the family drama and that we needed to work this out like adults. He offered to have a family meeting where everyone could air their grievances and move forward. I told him I'd consider it if it started with genuine apologies from everyone who participated in humiliating me. He said he thought that was fair, but then added that I should probably apologize too for overreacting and making everyone worry. That's when I realized they still didn't get it. They thought this was a mutual conflict that required compromise from both sides, rather than a situation where they'd done something wrong and needed to make it right. Remy's call was the most revealing. She was crying and saying she didn't understand why I was being so mean to everyone. She said the anniversary dinner was months ago, and I needed to let it go. When I asked her if she remembered claiming that Vicky was cheating on me, she got defensive and said she was just repeating what she'd heard. I asked her who told her that, and she got flustered and said it didn't matter because it was just girl talk and she didn't mean anything by it. Then she admitted she'd made it up on the spot because everyone else was making jokes and she wanted to join in. So my own sister had publicly humiliated me with lies just to get a laugh from the table, and she thought I should just get over it. The pattern in all these conversations was the same. None of them thought they'd done anything seriously wrong. They all believed their behavior was normal family teasing that I was overreacting to. They were upset about the consequences they were experiencing, the disrupted plans, the awkward family dynamics, the guilt and worry, but they weren't genuinely sorry about their actions. What really got to me was how they kept framing my boundaries as punishment, like I was withholding my presence to hurt them, rather than protecting myself from their toxicity. They couldn't understand that I genuinely didn't want to spend time with people who treated me that way, regardless of whether they were family. By the time I finished talking to all of them, I was exhausted but more convinced than ever that I'd made the right choice. Their responses to my hurt had revealed exactly who they were as people. And it wasn't pretty. But here's where things get really interesting. Because while I was having these conversations with my family, Vicky was having her own revelations about what side she wanted to be on. Update 2, Reddit. I'm back with the update you've been waiting for, and honestly, some of you called this perfectly in the comments. The user who said, "Watch how your wife reacts when she has to choose sides," was spot on. So after all those phone calls with my family that I detailed in my last update, I thought I was done with the drama for the day. I was emotionally drained from hours of conversations where I had to defend my right to basic respect over and over again. I came home expecting to maybe decompress with Vicky, tell her about the calls, and get some support from the one person who was supposed to be on my team. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Vicky was sitting at our kitchen table with her laptop open, and she immediately started in on me before I even got my jacket off. She said she'd been getting calls from my family all day, and that I was being unreasonable and hurtful. She said my mom had called her crying about how I was tearing the family apart and that my dad was so upset he was talking about not having a retirement party at all. I sat down and tried to explain what had happened in my conversations with each of them. I told her about my mom's refusal to apologize, my dad's dismissive attitude, my brother's attempt to make me apologize for being upset, and my sister's admission that she'd made up lies about Vicky cheating just to get a laugh. But instead of being horrified that my sister had publicly lied about her having an affair, Vicky seemed more concerned about the family disruption. She said Remy was just trying to fit in with the joke and didn't mean any harm. She said everyone was just trying to have fun at the dinner, and that I was holding on to hurt feelings instead of moving forward like a mature person should. That's when it hit me. Vicky wasn't just failing to support me. She was actively taking their side. I asked her directly whose side she was on in this situation, and she said there shouldn't be sides because we're all family. I told her that was a cop-out answer and that there absolutely were sides when one group of people humiliated another person and refused to apologize for it. I asked her again, did she think what they did at our anniversary dinner was acceptable, or did she think I had a right to be upset about it? She got defensive and said I was trying to force her to choose between me and my family, which wasn't fair. She said she loved me, but she also cared about my family and didn't want to see relationships destroyed over what she called a misunderstanding. So I asked her what exactly was misunderstood. Did she think my mom hadn't called me the family's biggest disappointment? Did she think my dad hadn't joked about betting on our divorce? Did she think my brother hadn't called my proposal pathetic? Did she think my sister hadn't claimed she was cheating on me? Vicky said those things did happen, but the intent behind them wasn't malicious. She said my family was just trying to be funny, and that I was interpreting everything in the worst possible way. She said she thought it was sweet how they were all so worried about me now, and that I should appreciate having family who cared enough to call and try to work things out. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to process what I was hearing. My wife of 10 years thought it was sweet that my family was worried about losing their convenient punching bag. She thought I should be grateful for their concern after they'd publicly humiliated me and refused to apologize. That's when I realized something I'd been avoiding for months. Vicky had been part of the problem all along. She hadn't just failed to defend me at that anniversary dinner. She'd actively participated by laughing and acting like their cruelty was entertaining. And now she was doing it again by minimizing their behavior and pressuring me to accept treatment I didn't deserve. I asked her why she laughed when they were making those jokes about me. She said she was just trying to keep things light and that she didn't want to make the situation more awkward by getting upset. I asked her if she realized that her laughter had made me feel like even my own wife thought I deserved to be humiliated. She got angry and said I was being unfair and putting words in her mouth. She said she loved me and would never want to hurt me, but that I was being too sensitive about family dynamics that had existed long before she came along. She said my family had always teased me and that I used to handle it better when we were younger. So I asked her when exactly she'd decided that I deserved to be the family punching bag. When had she stopped seeing me as someone worth defending and started seeing me as someone who should just take whatever abuse they dished out? That question made her really angry. She said I was being dramatic and using loaded words like abuse to manipulate her. She said teasing wasn't abuse and that I was trying to make her feel guilty for not overreacting to normal family interactions. I told her there was nothing normal about publicly calling someone a disappointment at their own anniversary dinner. I told her there was nothing normal about joking that someone's marriage was going to fail. I told her there was nothing normal about lying that someone's spouse was cheating on them for entertainment value. Vicky said I was exaggerating how bad it was and that I was choosing to focus on the negative aspects instead of seeing the bigger picture of family love and connection. She said my family's concern over the past few months proved that they really cared about me and our relationships. That's when I understood what was really happening. Vicky had bought into the same narrative my family was pushing, that their treatment of me was acceptable because it came from a place of love, and that my reaction to it was the real problem. She genuinely believed that I should tolerate disrespect from family members because they were family. But more than that, I realized that Vicky had her own reasons for wanting me to reconcile with my family. She liked being part of a big, close-knit family unit. She enjoyed the family gatherings, the group text messages, the sense of belonging to something larger than just our marriage. My estrangement from them was threatening that connection for her, and she resented me for it. I asked her if she would rather I accept being treated poorly so she could maintain her relationship with my family. She said that wasn't what she wanted, but that there had to be a middle ground where we could all get along without me holding grudges. I told her the middle ground was my family apologizing and committing to treating me better going forward. If they couldn't do that, then there was no middle ground because I wasn't going to sacrifice my self-respect for anyone's comfort. She said I was being stubborn and unrealistic. She said that's not how families work and that sometimes you have to overlook things to maintain relationships. She said I was acting like my family were strangers instead of people who had loved and supported me my whole life. I asked her to give me one example of how they'd supported me as an adult. I asked her to tell me about a time when they'd celebrated my achievements or had my back when I was struggling or treated me like someone whose feelings mattered. She couldn't answer that question. She started talking about childhood memories and how they'd helped us when we were first married, but she couldn't point to any recent examples of genuine support or respect. That's when I knew our marriage was in real trouble. It wasn't just that Vicky couldn't support me in this conflict. It was that she fundamentally didn't understand or agree with my right to demand better treatment. She thought my standards for how I should be treated were too high. The conversation went on for hours, and it kept coming back to the same basic disagreement. I believed I deserved to be treated with respect and dignity by everyone in my life, including family members. Vicky believed that family relationships required tolerance for behavior that wouldn't be acceptable from anyone else. She kept saying that I was destroying my family relationships over my pride, and that I should be the bigger person and work toward reconciliation. I told her that accepting mistreatment wasn't being the bigger person. It was being a doormat. She said I'd changed over the past few months and that she didn't recognize the person I'd become. She said I used to be more flexible and understanding and that I'd become rigid and unforgiving. I told her she was right. I had changed. I'd learned to value myself and expect better treatment from the people in my life. If she thought that was a bad thing, then maybe she needed to examine her own values. The conversation ended with both of us angry and frustrated. Vicky went to bed early, and I stayed up thinking about everything that had been said. The next morning she tried to bring it up again, saying she'd been thinking about our conversation and that maybe we should consider couples counseling to work through this issue. I told her I'd be open to counseling, but only if she was genuinely willing to examine whether her expectations were fair. I wasn't interested in therapy aimed at convincing me to accept poor treatment. She said she thought counseling could help me process my anger in healthier ways and learn better communication strategies for dealing with family conflict. When I pointed out that she was already assuming I was the problem that needed fixing, she got defensive and said that wasn't what she meant, but it was exactly what she meant. In Vicky's mind, the solution to this conflict was me changing my expectations and learning to tolerate my family's behavior better. The possibility that they were wrong and needed to change their behavior wasn't something she seriously considered. That conversation made me realize that my marriage problems went much deeper than I'd originally thought. This wasn't just about one bad dinner or one failure to have my back. This was about fundamental differences in how we viewed respect, boundaries, and what I deserved in my relationships. Over the following weeks, Vicky kept trying to broker reconciliation between me and my family. She'd mention calls she'd had with my mom or text messages from my sister, always framing them as evidence that they missed me and wanted to work things out. She'd suggest compromises like having dinner with just my parents or attending family events, but agreeing not to discuss the anniversary dinner. But I wasn't interested in compromise solutions that required me to pretend nothing had happened. I wasn't interested in sweeping their behavior under the rug for the sake of family harmony. And I wasn't interested in maintaining relationships with people who thought I should be grateful for their disrespect. The more Vicky pushed for reconciliation, the more I realized that she didn't really understand or support the person I was becoming. She preferred the old version of me who absorbed family abuse with a smile and didn't make waves. She was uncomfortable with my new boundaries and my refusal to prioritize other people's comfort over my own well-being. That's when I made a decision that I'd been avoiding for weeks. It was time to have a much more serious conversation with Vicky about where our marriage was heading. Final update. Reddit. This is it. The conclusion you've all been waiting for. And honestly, some of you saw this coming from my first post. Shout out to everyone who called it that. This was bigger than just family drama. So that conversation with Vicky that I mentioned at the end of my last update, it happened 3 days ago, and it was the most important discussion of our entire marriage. I'm talking about one of those conversations that changes everything permanently, where you both know that whatever happens next, there's no going back to how things were before. I'd been thinking for weeks about what I needed to say, and I realized that all the individual issues, the anniversary dinner, my family's phone calls, Vicky's inability to support me, were really symptoms of a much bigger problem. The fundamental question was whether Vicky and I had compatible values about respect, boundaries, and what I deserved in my relationships. I waited until Saturday morning when we both had time and weren't distracted by work stress. I made coffee for both of us, sat down at our kitchen table, and told her we needed to have a serious conversation about our marriage and where it was heading. She immediately got defensive and asked if I was talking about divorce. I told her that I wasn't making any announcements, but that we had some fundamental disagreements that needed to be resolved one way or another. I started by asking her a direct question. If my family never apologized for the anniversary dinner and continued treating me the same way they always had, would she expect me to maintain relationships with them for the sake of family harmony? She said that wasn't a fair question because she believed they would eventually come around if I gave them a chance. She said my complete cutoff was preventing any possibility of reconciliation and that I needed to take the first step by showing up to family events and acting normal. I told her that was exactly the kind of thinking that had enabled their behavior for years. I explained that I wasn't responsible for managing other people's emotions or fixing relationships that they had damaged through their own choices. If they wanted a relationship with me, they needed to take accountability for their actions and commit to treating me better. Vicky said I was being unrealistic about how families work and that I was applying standards that were too rigid for close relationships. She said that sometimes family members say hurtful things without meaning real harm, and that holding grudges over every slight would destroy most families. That's when I asked her the question I'd been building up to. I asked her if she thought the way my family treated me was acceptable, or if she thought I deserved better treatment from the people who claimed to love me. She tried to avoid answering directly, saying it wasn't about what was acceptable, but about finding ways to work through conflicts and maintain connections. She kept talking about the importance of family bonds and how rare it was to have a big, close-knit family like mine. So I pressed her harder. I asked her if she would be okay with our future children being treated the way my family treated me. Would she be comfortable with them being publicly called disappointments, having their achievements minimized, being made the target of cruel jokes at their own celebrations? That question made her pause, and I could see her really thinking about it for the first time. She said she wouldn't want our children to be hurt, but that she hoped we could teach them to handle family dynamics better than I had. I told her that was the problem right there. She thought the issue was my handling of the situation rather than their treatment of me. She thought I should have thicker skin, better coping strategies, more tolerance for disrespect. She didn't think they needed to change their behavior. She thought I needed to change my reaction to it. Vicky got frustrated and said I was twisting her words and making everything sound worse than it was. She said she loved me and wanted me to be happy, but that I was creating an impossible situation where she had to choose between me and my entire family. I told her that I hadn't created that situation. My family had created it when they decided that humiliating me was more important than maintaining a respectful relationship. And she had made her choice when she laughed along with their cruelty instead of defending her husband. She started crying and said she didn't laugh because she thought it was funny, but because she didn't know what else to do. She said she was caught off guard and didn't want to make the situation worse by getting upset. I asked her why she thought defending me would have made the situation worse. What could have been worse than watching my own wife join in with people who were publicly tearing me down? She said she was trying to keep the peace and that she thought I could handle it because I'd always been strong about family stuff before. She said she didn't realize how much it was affecting me because I seemed fine afterwards. That's when I understood something crucial. Vicky hadn't been maliciously choosing my family over me. She'd been choosing the path of least resistance. She'd been conflict avoidant rather than supportive, and she'd rationalized her non-action by telling herself that I didn't really need her help. But the result was the same regardless of her intentions. When I needed her most, she'd fail to show up for me. And instead of acknowledging that failure and working to do better, she'd spent months trying to convince me that I was overreacting to justify her own behavior. I told her that I understood she hadn't intended to hurt me, but that her impact was what mattered, not her intentions. I explained that I needed a partner who would have my back when others were treating me poorly, not someone who would prioritize keeping the peace over protecting our marriage. She asked what I wanted from her, and I told her exactly what I needed. I needed her to acknowledge that my family's behavior at the anniversary dinner was unacceptable and hurtful. I needed her to agree that I had every right to set boundaries with people who treated me that way. And I needed her to support my boundaries instead of pressuring me to sacrifice my self-respect for other people's comfort. Vicky said she could try to be more supportive, but that she still thought I was being too harsh and that cutting off my entire family was an extreme reaction. She said she was willing to go to counseling to work on communication, but that I needed to be willing to compromise too. I asked her what kind of compromise she had in mind. She said maybe I could agree to attend family events occasionally if they promised to be more careful about their jokes. Maybe I could have individual relationships with family members who were willing to be more respectful, even if others weren't ready to change yet. I told her those weren't compromises. They were me accepting partial respect in exchange for participating in my own mistreatment. I explained that I wasn't interested in relationships where I had to negotiate for basic dignity or where my boundaries were treated as suggestions. The conversation went on for hours, and it became clear that we had fundamentally different views about what I deserved in my relationships and what she should prioritize as my wife. Vicky kept coming back to the importance of family harmony and maintaining connections, even when those connections came at the cost of my well-being. I realized that this wasn't something counseling could fix because we weren't having a communication problem. We were having a values problem. She genuinely believed that my standards for how I should be treated were too high, and I couldn't build a life with someone who thought I should settle for less respect than I deserved. That's when I made my position clear. I told Vicky that I was committed to living a life where I was treated with respect and dignity by everyone in it, including my spouse. If she couldn't support that commitment, then we weren't compatible as partners. I explained that I wasn't asking her to cut off my family or to fight my battles for me. I was asking her to respect my choices about my own relationships and to prioritize our marriage over her desire for extended family harmony. She asked if I was giving her an ultimatum, and I told her I wasn't trying to manipulate or threaten her. I was simply being honest about what I needed from a marriage partner and letting her decide whether she could provide that. Vicky cried and said she felt like I was becoming a different person and that she missed the man she married. She said I used to be more easygoing and that she was afraid of losing the relationship we'd built together. I told her she was right that I'd changed, and that I was proud of who I was becoming. I'd learned to value myself and to expect better treatment from everyone in my life. If she preferred the version of me who accepted poor treatment with a smile, then maybe we weren't right for each other anymore. The conversation ended with both of us emotionally exhausted and no clear resolution. We agreed to take some time to think about everything we'd discussed and to continue the conversation later. But honestly, Reddit, I think we both know where this is heading. The fundamental incompatibility is too big to ignore. Vicky wants a husband who will prioritize family peace over personal boundaries, and I need a wife who will prioritize our marriage over extended family dynamics. As for my family, they're still calling and leaving voicemails, but the tone has shifted from panic to anger. My mom left a message saying that if I was determined to throw away my family over hurt feelings, that was my choice, but I shouldn't expect them to keep trying forever. My dad called to say that I was being selfish and that my behavior was affecting everyone's mental health. But here's the thing. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm simply refusing to participate in relationships that require me to accept disrespect. If that means I end up with a smaller circle of people in my life, but those people actually value and respect me, then I consider that a massive improvement. The irony is that their angry messages are proving my point. They're not upset because they miss having a loving relationship with me. They're upset because they've lost their convenient target for criticism and mockery. They're angry that I won't play my assigned role in their family dynamic anymore. And you know what? I'm completely at peace with that. For the first time in my adult life, I'm living according to my own values instead of trying to manage other people's emotions. I'm surrounding myself with people who see my worth instead of people who treat me like a charity case. My hiking group invited me on a weekend trip to the coast next month. My coworkers respect my input and value my problem-solving skills. I'm building friendships based on mutual respect and shared interests rather than obligation and guilt. Whether Vicky decides she can support this version of me remains to be seen, but I'm not going back to being the family punching bag, not for her and not for anyone else. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are, and the kindest thing you can do for yourself is believe them. My family showed me that they value their entertainment more than my dignity. Vicky showed me that she values family harmony more than my well-being. I'm finally listening to what they're telling me, and I'm making my choices accordingly.